Well, good day and welcome to Faith, Culture, Politics in Australia with Mark. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Graham Hood, former Qantas pilot, Captain Graham Hood, and I'm sure that many of the audience that follow me are aware of Graham, but just in case people haven't heard of Graham or aware of him, I'll just give you a bit of an overview before I bring him on, just to talk into a few things that are quite topical at the moment. So Captain Graham Hood, known as Hoody, is a former Qantas pilot with over 53 years of aviation experience, including 32 years as a captain flying over 35,000 hours and carrying approximately 5 million passengers. His life, marked by professional excellence and personal faith, took a significant turn during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hood's aviation career began with crop dusting and cattle mustering before joining Qantas. He met his wife Michelle during a flight, and their shared faith led them to engage in lay ministry, counselling those facing addiction and hardship. This commitment to service shaped his actions during the pandemic. In 2021, Qantas mandated COVID-19 vaccinations for employees. Hood, citing personal convictions, chose not to comply, leading to his retirement. He shared his perspective through a widely viewed video, I Do Not Consent, featuring a poem set to Qantas' theme song, marking his shift to public advocacy. Post-retirement, Hood launched a Unity tour, speaking at over 300 venues across Australia to promote resilience and open dialogue on pandemic policies. In 2024, he contributed to discussions on a potential royal commission into Australia's COVID-19 response, advocating for transparency and ethical governance. His talks emphasised unity and support for the marginalised. Over the past 5 years, Graham's transitioned from a respected pilot to a prominent advocate. With Michelle, he continues community outreach driven by faith and commitment to fostering dialogue. His story reflects resilience and an education to principled action during a challenging era. Some of the information for this bio was sourced from Daily Declaration, Southwest Voice, Malcolm Roberts, and The Spectator Australia in 2021. The viral video can be seen on Rumble. It's been viewed by nearly 1 million people just on Rumble, but so many other platforms, probably 1 million more. And Graham's currently got around nearly 12,000 subscribers to his Rumble. Graham also co-hosts a show called Club Grubbery with Johnny Lata as well, and a lot of traction on there as well with, I believe, and I'll get some clarification, over 300 or 500 odd interviews over that time. So I'm going to welcome Graham onto the stage. Graham Hood, a great pleasure to have you on board. I've been following you for a long time and really love that you've been able to give me the opportunity to have you talk into some of the topics happening around our country at the moment.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Mark. I remember and enjoyed our meeting in Adelaide when we were at that theatre. Where was that again?
That was in Norwood there. I think that was the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
the Norwood Theatre. Had an event going there, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. We met there and we promised at that time that we'd link up online and do a conversation like this. So I'm glad you reached out. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and look, just talking into that, when we met for the first time there, I did tell, a very true story, and it bears reflecting on. During COVID, obviously, a lot of people that have been following me knew my battle within the disability sector, advocating for people with disabilities during COVID, and also my battle with the Department of Child Protection in regards to foster children receiving what we know now as the COVID-19 vaccines. But I was saying to you at the time, and I haven't shared it too openly, is that I was really at a point where I felt like being in the corner in the fetal position and just weeping uncontrollably because of the whole weight of things that were happening during that time. I had a lot of issues, obviously, with family. They didn't understand why I was pushing back so hard because I was that inquisitive mind. And, my family, obviously the government, is the arbiter of truth. I had all the experts, the media was pushing all the information, and I felt like I was up against it, and I really was hitting a wall really hard, doing some videos back then, trying to get the message out of what I was learning. And I thought, I was just about to give up, and then your face popped up on this viral video, and I've got to be honest, mate, I wept because when you were so open and frank and honest in that video, it gave me hope that I wasn't alone. He is an experienced person that has so much, credibility as a pilot, so much because you've trained as well. Safety has been a big thing, and you knew that for you that wasn't the right thing to do. And I thought, no, wow, and it really gave me courage and lifted me up. And I haven't spoken too much about that, but and we talked about it. And I think we gave each other a big hug, and we both kind of wept. Because it made a big impact. And I think this is the thing, Graham, and I think you do realise. I think you've impacted so many hundreds of thousands of Australians, and grateful for your continued advocacy. So, and again, thanks for being on board.
I'm humbled by that, Mark. Yeah, it's been a huge journey, and we've shed a lot of tears over the last few years with each other, and everyone you run into. I remember at the rallies, all the rallies I've spoken at, you speak for 10 minutes maybe on stage, and then the rest of the stuff you do is in the crowd. And Michelle and I normally spend about 4 hours in the crowd after an event, just hugging and praying with people. And our shirts have been drenched with their tears, literally drenched. Our shirts are wet. And it's very uplifting. It's powerful in the context of, there are days when this morning a little bit actually, I just wanted to pull a doona over my head and go back to sleep and wake up thinking I was dreaming. But then you hear things like what you just shared and what other people share, and you think, no, we've got to keep going. We've got to keep going. Because this is not about ratings. It's not about followings. It's not about money. It's not about fame. It's about us being able to look at ourselves in the mirror at the end of the day. It's about standing in the shadow of our own conscience. That's what we're doing this for. You're not doing this podcast because you want to be famous. Neither am I. I never wanted it. When I made that video, I naively thought it would just be seen internally within Qantas. I had no idea that it was going to go. It had 9 million. It had 7 million views in the first 9 hours on platforms all around the world. So, and I haven't really had a breath since then. Yeah. You're the same. Johnny Lada's the same. There's so many guys. Michael Gray Griffiths. We're all in this same boat. Everybody's out there, and we're holding the line as best we can. And we make mistakes. We do things wrong, and we get criticised a lot, but we're still there.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's all on this massive learning curve. And before 2020, I was just trying to provide for my family. I've always had a fairly strong work ethic. I've been a person that's relatively, free from being involved with law enforcement, apart from some, speeding fines when I was younger, and basically just tried to do the right thing as a good person in the community, just trying to live my life. And 2020 come along, and wow, wasn't it a big eye opener? And I could have thought of nothing else than to put my head in front of a screen, in front of maybe 100 people, let alone possibly thousands now. But I had to document the journey, and I started my Rumble channel all those years back, just talking into what I was uncovering, and the doctors I was listening to, the people that were talking into a lot of the stuff that our mainstream media wasn't, and our politicians weren't, as you know. And we know those prominent names. We don't have to rattle them off because they're out there now. But these are the people I was listening to, and I was thinking, like, wow, like, there was something intrinsically in me that went, something's not right, and I never felt like that in my life, that I had the feeling of wanting to push back on something so hard and so vehemently that just didn't feel right for me. And at first I even didn't realize why I was pushing back or what it was that I was pushing against. But then as time went on, I fully started to realize that the world wasn't as I envisaged it, and there was a lot of input from I call them the shadow people, or shadow corporations, and that have an influence over our lives now that I never thought existed. But it's definitely out in the open and the light now. So it's been a steep learning curve for me, but I feel for people that it's still so much under the matrix, or in the matrix. And when I'm talking about 80 to 85% of Australians still, because that's what we're up against, that still aren't aware of the influences over their life, and for their future. You kind of get the same sense?
Yeah, I do. I'm gratified to see more and more people opening up to it. It's not. We've been saying for a long time that the people who slept through COVID are going to wake up when digital currency comes in, or digital ID and central bank digital currency, or when the Victorian government introduces a fire services levy of an increase of 187% and brings in a treaty with the Aboriginal people for 64,000 Aboriginals who live in Victoria. That's costing $700 million, in spite of the fact that 60% of the population voted against it. These are the people who thought we were crazy about COVID. They're going to get agitated about those issues now, and so the numbers are growing. And I think the government has proven in all of its three forms, local, federal, and state, that it is completely out of touch with the people. It's unable to read the room. You could see that when Albanese went into that forum in Bendigo, I think it was, where he was addressing the farmers, and he was completely unaware that the stuff coming out of his mouth was stupid, and the farmers were just really fed up. So, look, I think the people are waking up, but it's a slow process, isn't it?
It's a very, very slow process, very slow. And your big impact for you, big thing. I mean, you spent so much time with Qantas, and I'll talk into that. Obviously my brothers and myself were all born in Australia, and we love Australia. There's, the flag, the country, everything that it's afforded. I've got kids and grandkids, and we've got German heritage. And I've flown many times in my youth back over to Germany to visit family, grandparents, and all that. And every time I used to fly on Qantas, and I was such a proud Australian lad flying on Qantas over to Germany. The flight attendants were amazing. One time I went over myself as a 13-year-old, and I went over to visit my grandparents on my own. They got me up and they took me into the cockpit to meet the pilots. You used to get the drawing stuff as a kid. It was just such a proud thing for an Aussie kid to know that they're flying on the Australian flying kangaroo, and I was so proud. And that's why it was even so disappointing when I heard your story and talking about what Qantas was doing during that time. It was such a kick in the guts to see where it's taken, where it led. And so how do you feel with stories coming out just now, even in regards to the ex-CEO of Qantas now still getting his big pay rise? Like, how does that make you feel? Like, he's just been awarded this bonza, reaping 3.8 million final payout with all the failings. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's just here we go as a nation, as a people, rewarding treachery. That's what that is. That's he's being rewarded for treachery. I've never expected that someone like Alan Joyce would even begin to understand the culture of an organisation like Qantas within the Australian psyche. I mean, it's not just a business. It wasn't just it's not just a corporate brand. It's part of the Australian fabric. You talked about what it was like to go and visit the flight deck on a trip to Germany, and so many kids. I remember before 9/11, the joy we had sharing our workspace with passengers and kids as we travelled, and seeing and allowing them to see our pride in doing what we did and what we do for a living, and to know the history of Qantas is so inextricably linked to the outback and the First World War and the pioneers of Australia and its safety record and the courage of its operations throughout World War II, and the immense records that they broke in long distance flying and safety records. It was just incredible. For me, as a boy who stopped going to school when I was 13. I didn't leave school until I was nearly 14, but I wagged school for the last year. And I had a criminal record by the time I was 17, the juvenile record. I was a bad kid. I was on the wrong side of the tracks. For me to end up, even as ignominiously as I did end up, to say that I spent 32 years a captain with one of the world's oldest and safest airlines, it was a real testament to what this country was like. That a kid who did have a rugged upbringing, who didn't get an education, could still rise to the top of his profession in a job that wasn't a job. It was a joy. So I remember during the Community of Unity tour, we one of the ports of call was Longreach, and I delivered our address to the people of Longreach inside the auditorium of the Qantas Museum. Much to Alan Joyce's disgust, he was there a couple of days beforehand, apparently, and he didn't find out till after I'd been there that I was actually dressed in my old Qantas uniform for nostalgia reasons and talking to a bunch of people in Longreach about what was happening in our country. And some of it I filmed in the cockpit of the jumbo that's parked there. And there was an old DC-3 there that I used to fly. There was a bunk bed in the back, and I said to Michelle, look, that bunk bed, I've slept on that bunk bed on the way on flying across the Gulf of Carpentaria when I've had a rest. And to do that was, and to see the history that I was personally involved in was a real buzz. And see, I can, even though I was never the CEO of the company, I was just one of the pilots. I can lay claim to more of that heritage than Alan Joyce could ever lay claim to, no matter how much money he pulled out of the business.
Yep. Yeah, and we see that a lot, obviously, with the with CEOs just raking in a ton of money. I know that there was a big uproar around the CEO of Woolworths with the same, with the mismanagement of Woolworths and pulling in a heap of money. And I've got to say that, I still have a lot of frustration in regards to mandates from Woolworths as well, because I have a loved family member that had to endure being mandated to take something, and at the time they chose, obviously, they thought they had no option, so they chose it, that option, and ended up really, really cook after both doses just to keep their job in a retail industry. So I still have a lot of frustration in regards to these major corporations that weren't involved in health that put these mandates in place. And there's a lot still to come out of that. And this is the thing, though, Graham, isn't it? There's still so much hurt and trauma. The average person that kind of went along and they don't see themselves as having an injury, and they're kind of mind closed to the idea that someone's injured and aren't relating it to the vaccine. But those that are really suffering, that have been injured, lost loved ones, know it's as a result of what was done. There's so much hurt and trauma still in the community, but the medicine is only one thing. It's the lockdowns, it's the destroyed businesses, it's the destroyed families, it's the domestic abuse that happened during that time. The actions of our government and our bureaucracy, and even our media with their messaging of othering, has absolutely damaged so many Australians. It's not funny. And this is why so many people are now looking at getting out on the streets. And we're going to talk, obviously, a little bit about the rallies. But the way I see it is that the hurt hasn't been addressed effectively by government and bureaucrats, and the media definitely won't do that. And so is it any wonder that so many people are looking at every avenue to try and push back on government overreach? And unfortunately, then if people take it too far, everybody gets tarred with the same brush. There's so much hurt there, isn't there?
There is so much hurt, and it all stems back from not being heard, as you said. Just imagine, let's put ourselves into fantasy land for a minute. And Prime Minister Albanese, backed by his ministers for health and foreign affairs and treasury and whatever, addressed a press conference where they looked down the lens of a camera and said to the Australian people, we got this dramatically wrong. We are yet to come to terms with the things that have happened during the vaccine rollout, things that happened on our watch, the damage that was done to businesses, families, relationships, and lives. And we are dedicating our remaining term in government to getting to the bottom of this, to bring resolution and restoration to this country. And we ask for your forgiveness and support as we move forward. How would you feel if you heard that?
Well, there'd be some hope, wouldn't there?
I mean, even that, a lot of people would say to blazes with you, we still want to hang you. And I'm not into that category at all. I don't believe there's any room for violence in any of this. We've got to look at remedy. Remedy's the big thing. We've got to restore the health of people who their health is not being restored at the moment because the government's refusing to admit that the vaccine might have had anything to do with their injury. We're dealing with express rates of cancer that we hadn't even contemplated. Even the medical profession, those who aren't in denial, are saying this has gone nuts. I was talking with 2 paramedics yesterday who said that one of them said, I've had 2 cancers since I got the jab. The other one said, one of our colleagues, 30 years old, has just given up work because he's got stage 4 bowel cancer. 30 years old. And they said, we know from the call outs that we're doing, we know that people are vaccine injured. We know it. We just know it. And so, where was I going with that? I think there needs to be a recognition that the elephant in the room actually might be causing the problems. So then if we identify that, then we can start to say, right, let's give up all this rhetoric. Let's give up all this nonsense we've been going on with, all these narratives. People are dying. People are getting really sick. We've done a lot of damage. We were misled by the big pharmaceutical companies. We didn't know what we were doing. We know it's no excuse. But now we want to pour all the resources we have into the therapeutics, remedies available to restore the health of Australian people as a very first step. And so you've got people like Professor Ian Brighthope and Professor Robin Cosford who are working strongly on integrative medicine in Australia, and they're healing. I work a lot with Ian Brighthope. We've got a program together called Health Chats. And I know that his advice being used by people with terminal cancer is increasing their longevity and improving their quality of life, and in one case, completely cured. Acute myeloid leukemia, completely cured with a 20% chance survival rate because of massive doses of intravenous vitamin C. Now, these people, Ian Brighthope's already written up a revised health plan for Australia. It's already there, ready to go. 42 years of experience. He was an advisor to Tony Abbott when Tony Abbott was health minister in the federal government. This is a man of incredible skill, and he is ready, even at his age of 78, ready and poised to get Australia's health back into where it should be. So that sort of remedy is much needed. Then we also have the remedy required of restoring the broken, the severed and fractured spirit of this country, because it has been shattered. It has been shattered deliberately in many cases and inadvertently by some who don't even know they're being used as pawns. But regardless of all of that, we've got to restore that. And will that mean ultimately, in a perfect world, if we can get this happening, that people need to go to jail? Well, they do. They need to face the consequences, because when we don't get people to stand up and face the consequences, we enable bad behaviour to continue in the future. There needs to be a price. And even people like Daniel Andrews, as hated as he is, deserves the right to have a day in court and to be forgiven as long as he's repentant. And the whole country needs to repent. It's not just Daniel Andrews, it's all of us. We all need to, our strength, Mark, I believe, is not in our standing up, but in our getting on our knees. I think that's where our strength is. We need to get on our knees before the cross of Christ, and we need to repent. We've all had a role to play in this. Those of us who've been adversely affected, we elected these governments. We've been apathetic in the past, so we can't blame them for everything. This has happened on our watch. So my message going forward is we have to be sensible. We have to be responsible. We have to be compassionate. We have to accept that we're all broken and fallen human beings, and we've all made mistakes, and some of them are catastrophic and some of them aren't. But we're all a work in progress, and each day we've got to turn up for work hoping that we're a better person today than we were yesterday. And if these politicians and bureaucrats and CEOs actually went down that process, they would find themselves becoming richer than they ever imagined. Because I don't have any debt, Mark, but I don't have any money either. But I can tell you that I'm the richest man I know, because I have a solid relationship with Jesus Christ, and whatever comes, comes. There's not a person on the planet that I hate. I don't hate anybody. And I get a feeling you don't either.
No.
There's no profit. There's no profit in hatred. There's no spiritual profit in it, And for me, the people I've met in this journey in the last 4 solid years, I would never have met John Larder. I would never have met you. I would never have met Alan Novak in Adelaide, who's a guy who's very prominent over there. Fantastic guy.
Great human
there's
being.
all these, there's all these amazing people that I would never have met if this hadn't happened. And I know I'm a better man because of COVID. I know I am. And I know you are, because you've been tested. You've been sent to the front line and you didn't retreat. You stayed at your post and you kept the flag up, and you're continuing to do it, as am I. As much as I want to go fishing every day, we have a role to play, and it's a responsible role. And it's not to fire people up and get people angrier. It's to get people to settle down, calm down, and take a logical, rational approach to the situations that lie ahead of us, because they're monumental.
Absolutely right. Yeah, well said. And you are playing a big part in that. And this is where I think, obviously you've got over 130,000 people following on Facebook, which is incredible for that platform, and obviously through Club Grubbery and website. So your message is resonating with people, and why personally I'm drawn to it, because you have this reasoned approach, and this non-combative, non-violent approach to dealing with what's going on, and that's the way it has to be moving forward. And a good mate of mine, Bruce Pay, that I do regular podcasts with, he says,
Love Bruce.
I love Bruce, and he says that the government actually has a monopoly on violence. So violence is not going to solve anything. And I'm non-combative. I'm a pacifist anyway by nature. But we're not going to get anywhere by trying to take on the government, and because they have a monopoly over it. It's going to happen with peaceful mass compliance, but also trying to get and this is, I've thought about this a bit over the last few weeks, and I thought, like, people like us that kind of are aware of what's happening within the world and the influences, and not saying this in a sort of sense of being smarter, but we're kind of sitting at PhD level of information, right, of what we know is happening. And our fellow countrymen and women, our neighbours, are actually still at certificate 1 knowledge of what's going on. So the challenge for us going forward is, how do we get what we know and aware of and into a layman sense, to get it back down to our neighbours and our community? And I think that's a real challenge. And what I've been trying to encourage people to do, I've got involved in a small group in my local council area where we're talking about doing town halls on certain little topics that are targeted at people at that level, so getting into our neighbours, because I think with everything that's going on, a small percentage of people that are seeking to control our lives, and that I genuinely believe that 85% of people are just not aware, and they're inadvertently kind of an enemy of ours, because they are just going along with what is being told to them. So the more that we can wake the 85% up and in little bits and pieces, the sooner there's enough critical mass to push back on the sorts of things that have been trying to be implemented over our lives. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think the way we frame our messaging is really important. And we do have to wake more people up, because there's a psychological study called the 100th Monkey Syndrome, which was a study done by National Geographic, so I think it was. They sent some scientists to occupy 3 or 4 different islands in northern Japan where the macaque monkeys live. And they did an experiment where they had hides built on the beaches around these islands, well remote from each other, and they were feeding the monkeys sweet potato, and they were observing their hierarchical behaviour. Did the oldies get to eat first, and how did it work? And they noticed one day that one of the monkeys saw a sweet potato roll down the beach into the sea, and it went down and it picked up the sweet potato and came back up the beach to eat it. And when it ate it, it was salty and it liked the taste. So it went back and it kept dipping the sweet potato into the seawater. And the next day it grabbed a sweet potato from the beach and walked down to the seawater and did it. And a couple of other monkeys did it with it. And there were 700 monkeys in this study group on this one island. And eventually 100 monkeys got to a stage where they were seeing what was happening, and they grabbed a sweet potato and they dip it in the salt water to improve the taste. And what the other scientists noticed on the other islands was that when 100 monkeys on that island had decided that that's how they were going to eat their sweet potato, All the monkeys on all the islands did it, even though they weren't connected to each other, separated by water. So they call that the 100th monkey syndrome, and that's translated in psychology to a position where you can say that once you get 20% of a population to agree on a fashion idea or a new ideology, it's going to go off no matter what happens. You can't stop it. So we're not at the 100th monkey in Australia yet, but we're getting close. And that should worry politicians because they can really put this to good use. They can actually use this to do wonderful things in this country, or they can ignore it and just wait for the consequences. So the way I believe it is, John and I in particular try and keep our message disciplined and focused in Club Grubbery because we want it to be watchable by people outside the echo chamber. Because if we go on about flat earth and all the other things that people are upset about, and we talk about, Neil Armstrong didn't walk on the moon, all that sort of stuff, there's a whole bunch of people who are just going to draw a line through you. Now, but we need them, Mark. We need those people to increase our numbers. And they need us. They just don't know it yet. So I do things like I did with these paramedics. And I did it on the program the other night. I did an interview with Rob McKnight. McKnight Tonight. He's an ex-producer with Channel 10. Yeah.
Yeah, watched
so Rob
that.
interviewed me. Yeah, so I think you saw the part where I asked him, if you thought someone was tampering with your DNA or your immune system, would you like to know about it? And I've had 2 people say no. And I say to them, all that does is indicate that you're so stuck in your narrative that you're too proud to step out of it. Because I want to be wrong in my assumptions about the COVID vaccine. I want it to be wrong. Because if I'm right, a lot of people I care about are going to die. And I don't want that to happen or are going to become sick. And all I'm saying is, and John and I are deliberate, we often say, please come on and explain why we're wrong. Now, you get the odd doctor who's, flipped out because there's some nut jobs wear white coats, I can tell you. There's one in particular who keeps harassing everybody and trolling everybody. But when you offer to put him up against people like Peter McCullough and so on, it's a non-event, But and I say to people, people say to me, you're not interested in the science. And I say, do you know who Professor Robert Clancy is? No. Well, then you tell him he's the most respected immunologist in the country, cited by the Scott Morrison government many times during the mandates and the rollouts. Would you say he had a strong scientific knowledge? Oh, yeah, I reckon. Well, he's saying, don't get jabbed. Don't do it. We shouldn't be doing this. So we've got to find a way of getting them to see that it's not Graham and Mark's message. This message comes from people way far down the track than we are in the knowledge of these events and the science behind it. And we've got to draw people into listening to them. So my view is a Christian one. When I'm approaching somebody on any topic like this, all I've got to do is love them, not frighten them, not browbeat them, not Bible bash them, just love them. And I want them to know the truth or part of the truth that I've got so they can start their journey. So I plant little seeds and then I don't stand there and defend my position. I walk away and leave it. If they want to ask a question, they'll chase me and say, hang on a minute, can you sort of enlighten me a bit more? Then they're listening. Because when people ask a question, they're listening for the answer. But when we're standing there browbeating somebody and we don't read the room, like we're accusing the government of, we lose our audience. We lose the potential to grow our numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of great stuff to pull out of there. And look, the faith thing is a big thing, and I wanted to mention that earlier. Is that I do genuinely, because you said that how growing better over the period over the COVID period, and I 100% talk into that. I think I'm not a cradle Christian. I came to the faith late, and I listened to the tap on my shoulder, when I was a bit older. And but I've got to say, the last 5 years have definitely strengthened my my love of Christ and the want to be the Christian and live a Christian life and that messaging. And it is really tricky doing that now once you've found that, to be able to talk into some of those polarizing issues that are happening in the world and even our own country. So it is really and obviously I always call on him to strengthen me in those situations, because I can't do that on your own, because these polarizing conversations are often manipulated by others, and this is talking about some of your interviews, and I know that you interviewed Trevor Loudon as well, I believe, and I've heard of some of his other interviews, and it was a real eye opener and a shock to me about what he was saying in regards to the influences over our nation from a communist ideology. And I'm not a massive historian, but I just know that communism, Marxism, socialism, all these things don't end well for societies. And yet we seem to have this almost open message that there's a sort of a communist influence over our country. That is really concerning, and even for people of the Christian faith, because it's a real undermining of our own faith system and belief system. And that, do you think just Australians aren't aware of that influence, and they've just got their eyes closed to it, because it's obviously very open?
Boy, I'm so glad you raised this topic, because it's going to be a feature of what I say at the rally on Saturday. We are definitely under a communist Marxist takeover. There's no doubt about that. It's clearly identifiable in so many ways once you understand the history. Now, we sent soldiers to Vietnam to stem the flow of communism through Southeast Asia, because we didn't want it in our country. And yet we're voting for politicians who are communists now. Anthony Albanese is a communist. Gough Whitlam was a definite communist. You read the book by Trevor Loudon, Comrade Prime Minister, and we've interviewed him twice, and he's become a bit of a mate. And I'm going to interview him on a topic, Enemies Within the Church, which is about communist infiltration of Christian churches, which is a really big thing. We are a communist Marxist country. The woke agenda is all about communist Marxism. Now, why? It's hard to imagine a bunch of Bolsheviks wanting to support anything like a woke agenda. Now, just go bear with me on this for a minute. So you can't imagine a bunch of Bolsheviks looking at someone who's transgender, a guy dressed as a woman, and supporting that ideology, but they do. And the reason they do it is to destabilize. So after the Cold War ended, it started in the mid-60s. The KGB set up a plan to keep the Cold War going. And their plan was to infiltrate Western culture and to manipulate it to the point that they could control it. Now, there's a guy called, I think he was Andrei Medvedev or someone like that. He was a KGB agent who defected to America. He was interviewed in 1986, and he outlined their plan beautifully. And it said, first you demoralize your enemy, then you destabilize him, and then you normalize that behavior in his culture. So he said, how we destabilize him, how we demoralize him, for a start, is we infiltrate his media. We infiltrate in America's case, it was Hollywood, which they did. The communist takeover of Hollywood happened in 1948. And Ronald Reagan was one of the big brick walls against that. Ronald Reagan did so much good that we'll never understand. But he did so much to stem and destroy communism and bring down the Berlin Wall. But anyway, so they said, we infect the culture. How do we infect the culture? With the media, with the movie makers, with the entertainment industry. Then we infiltrate the universities. We put our operatives in the universities to infiltrate the thinking and indoctrinate the universities. And you look at our universities now. We destabilize the health of the nation. So, they were supporting things like McDonald's and fast food outlets to make Americans fat and lazy. The pharmaceutical industry, it's all tied into this agenda. And it's very, very clever. Now, this agent said that normally we allow 30 years to impact a country to the point where we've got it. But we managed to get America in 15 years. Wow. And we've done it now. So, first of all, you demoralize it. So you have... you support the pornography industry, you support transgenderism, risque entertainment, You bring sex into the living rooms of homes, alcohol, drugs, rock and roll, the whole box and dice. You bring a destabilizing, demoralizing influence into a country. You make them fat, dumb and lazy and bloated on entitlement. Then you normalize all that. So you will remember photographs of the 1960s where you never saw a fat person on a beach in Australia. Everyone was trim and fit. We had thick skins and thin wallets in those days. Now we've got thin skins and thin wallets. We've been indoctrinated to embrace this Marxist woke agenda by communists who've been playing this game for decades, and Anthony Albanese is one of them. Make no mistake. Gough Whitlam was a prime driver of that. These men have deliberately destabilised our nation to the point that we are a pushover. So we need to ask ourselves, what is Daniel Andrews doing in Beijing, shaking hands with Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping? He's a non-elected representative. Why is he standing in the third row of the photographs of the dignitaries at that military parade? What's going on there? Why did he initiate the Belt and Road Initiative in Victoria, linking China with Victoria, even though that was against Australian government policy, and it was Scott Morrison who stopped that? Why do we have ports in Darwin and other places in the top end that are owned by the Chinese? Why do we have massive ownership of property by the Chinese groups? Why do we have Penny Wong addressing elite groups of Chinese citizens prior to the election? Why were the Chinese citizenry in Australia sent messages from the CCP prior to the election, calling Anthony Albanese the handsome boy? There were 600,000 votes in that for Anthony Albanese. These are the questions we need to ask in order to work out who the real enemy is. Now, that enemy is really happy for us to hate Islam. That enemy is really happy for us to believe that anyone who speaks Arabic who believes in Islam is a terrorist. And we know they're not. Just like not all Zionists, not all Jews are Zionists. Not all Arab-speaking Muslims are terrorists. If you go to Ireland, not all Protestant Irish people are terrorists. Not all Catholic Irish people are terrorists. So all these narratives are designed by the communist Marxist regimes of the world to destabilise countries like Australia, and we've allowed it to happen on our watch. And that's the message. We're being diverted away from the real enemy by all these fringe things. And the COVID mandates is one of them. And what are we seeing? We're seeing the ABC and other various mainstream outlets setting up things like the FBI did around JFK, the term conspiracy theory. Now we've got, what have we got? Sovereign citizen movement, the SovCits. And if you disagree with the government, you're a sovereign citizen. I don't know what you know about the sovereign citizen movement. I've struggled to understand any of it. And I'll be honest with you, when I see the videos of people arguing with police about their car registration, I cringe. I just don't see myself ever doing that. You know, if I haven't registered my car, if I've broken a speeding law, then, you know, my old man would clip me around the ear and say, well, you broke the law, pay the fine. I mean, I'm just not there. There are some battles that I will die on a hill for, but that's not one of them for me. I don't want the grief of not paying my rates. I don't want to feel like a police car is going to come up with council employees. They're going to evict me from my home in 5 years' time because I haven't paid the rates. That's just not me. I'm not denigrating the people who do it, but we've got to also look at the messaging. Does that support the messaging of rational people who want to see a government who's prepared to listen to them? And if we make ourselves look like idiots in any other things that we take on, then that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to use that to make the rest of the country think that we're nut jobs.
Yeah, and this is a big thing that I've kind of been talking about as well in some of my podcasts, is that this distractionary stuff. I've even had marches, people talking about, oh, you should be flying the blue flag or the red ensign and all this, and it's kind of, and this is within the people that are actually looking at pushing back against a lot of stuff, and I'm thinking that is just so distracting, and who cares which flag you want to come and fly? It's an Australian flag, both were adopted and voted upon, the blue and the red ensign. And the same thing with the constitutional arguments around, the corporate government and Queen of Australia and all these discussions. I absolutely agree with people to be able to do that and pursue that if they feel that that's the way they do it. But I think it also distracts, because for someone like me, and I'm kind of aware of what's going on in the world to a certain extent, it's hard enough for me to grasp that concept. How on earth are we going to get the 80% of Australians that are already influenced by media calling us nut jobs? How are we going to explain to them that they actually, the government that they're voting for isn't actually a legitimate government, if the people that are talking about this aren't even in agreement and haven't been able to bring it to a masthead to get enough people on board to help them understand that? And I think all that is it redirects from where we should be. And what you're talking about is trying to bring as many people together against the common enemy, which we've indicated is the communist influence over our nation, trying to undermine every fabric of our society and focusing on that. But we'll kind of be just so distracted by all these other things. But you raise a good point, because you have a massive platform. We've got Topher Field, we've got Avi Yemeni, we've got Rukshan, we've got so many great podcasters like yourself and Johnny Lada. And this is the thing, we have to be different. We have to have, the messaging has to be right, because the mainstream media is influenced by these communist ideologies and seeking division further. And that's who we're up against. So and I'm seeing a shift. I'm seeing more people looking at alternative media, looking at different platforms. And I mean, this is sort of a bit more long form, where people like short snippets, but there's a bit of everything. And that's what we're up against, is the media that seems to be more of an arm of the state than the fourth estate. So they are, rabbiting that, they're the mouthpiece for the government. So my question to you, whether you might have an answer on this then, do you believe that the average minister or member of parliament, let's say Chris Bowen or whatever, whoever it might be, do you genuinely believe the majority of them are, on board with this agenda? Or do you believe that the media has that much influence that they actually listen to the mainstream media rather than doing their own observations and deep diving? So the question is, do you believe that the government officials, the bureaucrats, the politicians are complicit, or are they heavily influenced by the media messaging?
I think when you look at the average, look, and I don't mean to denigrate people personally, when a lot of people say that our politicians are all up to their neck in the planning of this sort of stuff, I don't see many of them as having the intellect really to embrace some of this stuff that we're talking about. I think more than being influenced by the media, I think that probably the party machine is influenced by the media, and the party machine influences the politicians and the ministers. So the problem, the clear indicator of how that's working is in the Liberal Party, because the Liberal Party is just the Labor Party dressed in blue. And that is because the left-wing factions of the Liberal Party, the woke factions, control the conservative factions, which in the past under Robert Menzies would have been ruling this country for the last 50 years. But they haven't been able to, the Liberal Party has caved into the woke agenda because they're too busy worrying about votes and support, financial support, to say that, we're representing the people of this country, and the people of this country need a viable opposition or a profoundly strong government, either way. And so the media play into that, of course, because the media are all invested in these political parties and vice versa, because that's where the money is, and the political advertising and all the other trinkets that go with it. I think the mainstream media has definitely become, where it should have been the fourth estate and separate from government, it has become the propaganda ministry for the government. There's no doubt about that. And that's why I believe church and state should be separate as well, Mark, because the church has become an instrumental arm of the state. We saw that when churches were applying mask mandates and abiding by vaccine mandates and firing employees because they wouldn't be jabbed against their liberty of conscience. Liberty of conscience went out the window when the government was waving the money flag at the churches. there was too much money involved for the churches to go against the government. There are too many government grants and tax incentives. For example, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know that they like me that much at the moment, but that's irregardless of that. I believe in their doctrinal beliefs. But the Seventh-day Adventist Church in America, where it's headquartered, the global church is headquartered, was receiving $23 billion a year in funding through Medicare and Medicaid. Now, that was because the Seventh-day Adventist Church is one of the largest non-public health providers in the world. They provide hospitals and teaching hospitals and everything. They've been very strongly focused on health for over 100 years, 150 years. And so when the government in America applied the mandates, the church adopted a policy where it completely trashed liberty of conscience for its members and wouldn't support them with letters of if people were applying for exemptions, they wouldn't give them letters of exemption based on their beliefs. And their beliefs were, like the Seventh-day Adventists, you don't drink coffee, you don't eat pork products, you don't eat shellfish, you don't drink alcohol, you don't smoke, because those things harm the temple of the Holy Spirit. But all of a sudden, they said, you're not allowed to eat bacon, but you can put in an experimental gene therapy in your arm. And they did that because they knew there was $23 billion annually in funding just for the US arm of the church. And they applied that policy right around the world for everybody else in the worldwide church. And they're not the only ones. Every single church did it. The Catholics did it. You had the Archbishop of Canterbury saying if Jesus was alive today, he'd be vaccinated. I mean, we had every single church marched in lockstep. And that's why corporate churches are splitting, and home churches like the one we run here in northern New South Wales, and we're spreading a bit of a network of that, just quite incidentally, is going so well because people are now turning to home churches rather than corporate church because they've lost faith in corporate church. They've lost faith in everything except Jesus.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the story of myself as well, coming to the faith late and involved with a church for a little while before COVID hit, and haven't been back since because of that, but I've obviously got some very strong Christian friends in the community, and that, just that church without walls, that you've got that going as well. It's massively important, and it's amazing how many people have come together. And I even did a bit of a video, a message a few years back, 3 years, when the Pope and others come out around encouraging Catholics to take it. I'm not a Catholic, but I spoke into it because I thought, here's this message, especially because of what I knew. I did this message saying you really need to know the information that's out there. You're having these leaders, these church leaders, telling you it's the right thing to do for humanity to roll up your sleeve, but have you really considered and looked at all the information that's out there? So yeah, you're right. They're all complicit in that, that separation. And that money is the big thing, isn't it? Because even a lot of churches in Australia are very reliant on government money. And as soon as you're, in for the government with any sort of funding, then you almost lose that separation ability, don't you? So it's a lot of things going wrong. But so we've spoken into quite a number of topics, and obviously we've got the rally coming up on Saturday. Now I found out obviously through the video of Joel Jamal's that you ended up being a lead speaker at the one in Sydney, but this is when we knew. Before we knew that Harbour Bridge is no longer available for that march, which in itself really stinks compared, considering what others have been allowed to do. And stepping back a bit, because I watched a video of you talking into that march on the 31st, and you really weren't sure because of the messaging around the National Socialist Network involvement and all that. And to be honest, I was very apprehensive about initially joining the one here in Adelaide. But as soon as I found out, and hat tip to Mark Aldridge here in Adelaide, doing amazing stuff with organising this new one, and that he decided to get involved in the other one. When I found that he was involved, I went, no, I'm giving this my support, knowing full well that there was still going to be some influence from the National Socialist Network. And I've tried in my messaging leading up to that about pushing back on that view, their viewpoint that they hold, because I totally don't agree with it. And so we ended up, and you know what, I live streamed it, and I was just amazed, Graham. And they even accurately reported at the police here. They said between 10 and 15,000 South Australians, Adelaideans, turned up, even though there was so much media negativity calling them all Nazis and racists and all this sort of stuff. Yet I was on the ground talking to people. They were everyday mums and dads with their children, grandfathers, you know, average Australians, and it was just such an amazing thing. And obviously sport towards the end by, you know, obviously the NSN wasn't meant to be speaking, but they got up there. There was a lot of stuff going on. But when I watched you were a bit apprehensive about that march on the 31st as well, but you ended up kind of saying to people, well, you know, it's either we do or don't, you know, like we've decided this is going ahead now. We've got to try and control it the best way we can, which is what Mark was trying to do. And all in all, with all the negative media messaging, it gave me heart that Australians are learning to disregard labels and accusations and get out there. Is that one of the reasons that you're happy to kind of get involved in this one more now when you were kind of asked and approached?
Yeah. The reason I didn't, people were saying to me, what do you think of this march on the 31st? This was early in the piece, and I had no idea what it was about. I know an 18-year-old boy had this dream of doing the march and started it and then backed out of it. And then some of the players that were getting involved in it, I believe, were doing it in the right heart. But the National Socialist Network wasn't sitting really, really well with me for various reasons. And I did a video with John after the 31st explaining why I didn't go to one of the events. I did drive past a couple on the way. I was going to Yamba on a Sunday, and I saw people on the side of the road and called in and said g'day to a few of them, and it was good to see them. Johnny Larder went to the rally in Canberra. And I would have, under slightly different circumstances, I would have gone. The big thing for me was when it was made all about mass immigration, I knew in my heart that the media were going to turn that into a hate fest, into a racist hate fest. And I thought, I thought to myself, 95% of the people that go to that rally will be standing under an Aussie flag, and they'll be talking about all the things that they don't like about living in Australia. And it'll have nothing to do with race or immigration. And so I was a bit put off that it was that messaging. The messaging of this rally on Saturday is it's about government corruption, not just any financial corruption that might be taking place, but corruption of thinking and policy. And that to me gives us a broader spectrum to speak into. And also it gives us an opportunity to show any of the mainstream that a lot of our fears on the rally ground are the same as theirs and the people who live at home and watching this on TV. So for me, that was good. Now, the other reason is a very deeply personal one, which I'm happy to share. I have, I won't mention the relationship I have, but a very, very close member of my family is married to an Egyptian Muslim, and she has 3 beautiful children who look like Palestinian children. They're Middle Eastern background. And I did not want, I love that you know, the Egyptian man I'm talking about is a naturalised Australian. He got citizenship after 10 years of being here. He loves being an Aussie. He's more of an Aussie than most Aussies I know. He loves the Australian flag. You know, he likes a cold beer on a hot day. He loves to go fishing. He's an absolute gentleman. And there's not a vicious, nasty bone in his body. And I couldn't really support a rally on that for personal reasons, because I didn't want it to be construed for that I was a racist or that I was against their immigration and their facilitation in our country. So I was deeply torn by that. And the other thing is that the messaging very early in the piece was, we don't want any of these so-called influencers. Don't you hate that term, influencer? We don't want any of these influencers getting involved. We don't want them speaking. We don't want them getting involved. And I thought, you beauty, that's great. Because I personally believe that rallies are better off if people just march and turn up. And probably the less said, the better. It's just their numbers. As long as the government knows why they're there, the less spruik from a stage, the better. So I thought, you know what, this rally, if this rally is huge, it's going to be because the people want it to be huge, not because of any influencers like me saying you should go or you shouldn't go. So I thought it needed to be left to be organic, but other people got their knickers in a twist about it. They started looking for reds under the bed, and there was a lot of messaging going out to and from, which was not helpful. And the same thing is happening about this rally on Saturday, especially in Sydney. It's not helpful. You know, we're pitting ourselves against the government, not against each other. So when I was asked to would I speak at a rally in Sydney to promote the disenfranchisement of the average Australian citizen with their government, that was something I could really give my wholehearted support to, because that's what I really believe is my mission in this. And that they said to me, if you come along, a lot more people will come along, and we want more and more people to come along to build on the momentum that was started on the 31st of August, which I am so glad to say was relatively uneventful. I had a horrible premonition that something bad would happen at one of these rallies to give the government an opportunity to crack down on us. Like I thought there might have been a shooting or a bombing, or I had this horrible premonition that that would happen, because that would be the perfect way for the government to say, righto, no more rallies, no more free speech. And they would have a lot of public support in that. So I, having seen that event, watching that event unfold live where I was punching the air with pride for Australia. I thought the Australian people conducted themselves beautifully. They went out there, they controlled the messaging overwhelmingly. I never saw much hate other than round the rally stage amongst that group that were argy-bargy with each other. And there was, you know, Palestine, Israel all became involved in it. It all got ugly around that small nucleus. But if you asked 300 people at any of those rallies what they were there for, you would have got 300 beautiful answers. They'd have all been different, but they'd have all been true. And that's what I think is great about the Australian people. That's why I think that rally was an unqualified success. And that's why I think now that momentum has started and the people of Australia have said that's what they want to do, then it beholds any of us who agree with that to go along with it. But I will never sign up to a rally. I've learned enough, believe me, especially after Canberra. I will never sign up to a rally that I'm not fully across who's organising it and what the real reasons, what the real agenda is, because it's very easy to get led down blind alleys in these rally things. And I don't organise rallies. If I'm invited to speak, I'll go if I think it's a worthy cause. But otherwise, I'm not going to associate. I'm not going to associate with a racist, hate-filled agenda. And the people of Australia made the 31st of August exactly the opposite of that. You know, I saw Africans and Aussies and Jews and Palestinians and everything marching in that rally in Melbourne. A lot of them had their arms around each other. They put away their differences for that day. And that's what makes Australia the country that it really is, underneath the Albanese deceit that goes on around it.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And this is why I say I think the way Adelaide was such a success, even though the thing on the end is because I ended up finding out who the organizer was very openly, was in contact with Mark as well. He was fighting back forces that were really trying to undermine it all the way along, because no one didn't really want him to be a co-organizer. But obviously we saw great success in the end in Adelaide with the numbers. I mean, that you're exactly right with what you're saying, is that even if no one speaks, if you get 1 million Australians getting out on the street, 1 million plus Australians getting out on the street, that is what sends a clear message to the government and the media that there is something that needs to be addressed, and there's a lot of people that are clearly frustrated. And you know, here for me in Adelaide, obviously I've been a big advocate for getting out and you know, pushing on some of the issues that are happening. And there is so much wrong, Graham. I put this little list together the other week before Adelaide. I mean, these are just some of the state-based issues on the left column, and then you've got national issues on the right. There's a ton of reasons, Graham, that people would be going out on the street to be frustrated about with government. There is a huge list there that I've kind of compiled. And if you think here in Adelaide, obviously, I've just done a little bit of a podcast the other day talking about the international health regulations and tying that into the South Australian Emergency Management Bill, which has just been put on steroids. And if you add into that the declared climate emergency, South Australia, there should be 100,000 getting out on the street, not just 15 or 20,000, based on what the implications are here in Adelaide. But it is the same all around the country, and I guess this is why you've decided that you're going to get out there on Sydney, and obviously you're speaking into it because there is just so much wrong. I mean, that list is not even exhaustive, but there's so many reasons, isn't there, for people to get out and really show the government that they're unhappy with what's going on.
And that list, it's funny enough because John and I've compiled a list. We've got a broadcast going out tonight. Of things that have happened just in the last few days since the bridge was cancelled, for example. You've got Paul Offey, the truck driver in Canberra, who's waiting for the jury to deliver a verdict on his situation at the moment.
They found, I don't know if you saw that, but Michael Gray Griffith put a post up there. They found him guilty on that charge.
Oh no.
Yeah, and they've still got a few to deliberate. I think from what Michael was saying, they're not looking at a custodial sentence or something, but still the other charges have still got to be heard. But apparently on the one attempting to drive at police or something like that, I think they've got him guilty on that one at this stage. I saw that just before we went on live, or before we went on.
Oh, that's bizarre because I've seen that video and that's not what he was doing. Anyway, that's really sad. I was hoping he'd be acquitted, but anyway.
Now,
there's a certain influencer who played a large part in that, who needs to be held to account for his actions on that day. Anyway, we've got the fire levy in Victoria, which has just been introduced, 187% increase in the fire levy, which none of the emergency services wanted, but the government are doing it to raise money to get out of debt while they're spending $700 million on a new Aboriginal treaty that 60% of the population voted against only a couple of years ago with the referendum. So that's another indication of government that's lost its way. We've got the Premier of New South Wales efforts to make sure that rally didn't go ahead on the bridge. He made us, in a press conference, he said, I will exhaust every power available to make sure that rally does not occupy the bridge. But every other rally was okay. Why? Because we're talking about government corruption. The machete attacks in Melbourne, despicable what happened there. And the government's answer is to spend $350,000 each on disposable machete boxes that are put in front of police stations under a spotlight with a camera on them. They're not collecting machetes. And they spent $350,000 a year on a unit, which is effectively a clothing bin out the front of St. Vinny's with a bit of security added to it. That's their answer to the whole thing. We've got a government telling us that we can't have coal for coal-fired power stations to power our industry and reduce our costs of electricity, but they're happy to rip it out of the ground and prostitute themselves and sell it to India and China, where they burn it. So why can't we burn it? If we're selling it for money so they can burn it, how does that make us responsible citizens in the world? No jab, no play mandates where people, and we interviewed a couple in America yesterday. By the time you're 12 years old in the States, you will have had, if you followed the protocol, 92 toxic substances injected into your body. And it's killing people. And as we speak now, the American Congress is about to hear all about that from RFK. We're about to hear that autism is caused by vaccines. We've got the French government being overthrown at the moment. They've had their fourth prime minister in as many weeks. They can't work with Macron. Macron looks like he's finished. The people are taking over. The government of Nepal has been overthrown, and that city is in flames because the people have had enough. And we have a government that refuses to listen to its population and does not know the mood of the people, which is getting worse. We have a situation where police officers carrying out their normal duties, lives are at risk because citizens have been worn to a frazzle by fear narratives and fear campaigns run by government. And I said this on the McKnight program the other night, that conspiracy theories thrive when governments keep secrets. Yeah. Evil thrives when government keeps secrets. Evil thrives when people keep secrets. And if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem.
Yeah.
So these and all your reasons for getting out there on Saturday are valid, and we should all go out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very important. There's so many reasons for people should get out there. But, and I've said this for the 31st as well, and even this one, getting out on the street isn't the end. We need to continue to look at ways that we can reach our fellow neighbours, our fellow, citizens, whatever, whoever it is, even people in the media that hopefully wake up, politicians, bureaucrats, whoever they are. Our messaging needs to continue beyond the 13th. Because but hopefully it'll be enough for them to realise that enough people, people have had enough. So, look, I've taken up a fair bit of your time, Graham, and gone for a little bit. Obviously, the talking points have been amazing, and I love hearing. I know the audience does. I'm just wanted to kind of talk into. Obviously, we have that shared faith of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and wanted to talk into this a little bit. And I know it may ruffle a few feathers, and I know I shouldn't have to, but I'll start off with this: that I've worked in the disability sector. I've worked for a long time with people of all ethnicities. Love them dearly, whether they be from Chinese background, Indian background, African background, European, wherever they come from. I've worked with the most beautiful human beings from all ethnicities. But I often say that, and I have German heritage, but I'm full true and blue Australian. In Australia, we have a culture. It's called the Australian culture that was built up over years from 1788 onwards. And I know there's been some hurt in the past. We have an ethos and a set of values in this country that stems from a Judeo-Christian background and heritage. When our constitution was enabled from all the states in 1901, we had about 98% of Australians that identified as Christians. Today, we have approximately 44% of Australians, according to the last census, that shows only 44%. So there's been a massive decline. Some of it's been deliberate, it's been undermining lots of things. And I guess the concern that I have is, and I guess the message from you is that with this decline, and with people from different cultures or belief systems, other than the Judeo-Christian culture, coming into Australia, and again, as I said, I reiterate the people that live here already. When we're seeing certain beliefs that are hostile to the Christian faith, so we know that there's some countries with big populations that, even according to Open Borders, the World Watch List, are hostile to people of the Christian faith. That is data that's out there. That's not been throwing things out there. What's your message to our fellow Christians as we go forward, and there seems to be a continuous decline in the Christian faith, but also seeing people from other cultures coming into our country? What's your message to fellow believers in regards to how we move forward?
Your question is so timely, because at 4 o'clock this morning, I jumped out of bed and wrote down a whole bunch of things that I know God wants me to talk about at the rally on Saturday. And you asking me that question is the icing on the cake for what I'm going to say and why I'm going to say it and why I'm deliberately going to push it really hard. We are struggling in this country and around the world with a whole lot of isms. You've got communism, fascism, consumerism, spiritualism, spiritism, millennialism, even Zionism at some levels. You've got all these isms, and they're all bringing us down. What happened in this country since 1901 to allow this to happen? We have been de-godding Australia. We have been taking God out. If God is the light and we're in a battle between light and dark, we have been dimming the light to the point where it's almost extinguished. Now, when I was an atheist back in 2006, ready to kill myself because I couldn't see any point in living anymore, I had no belief in anything. I had struggled with a God-shaped hole in my soul for most of my life that I tried to fill with everything but God, and nothing worked. And the minute I put God in there, It was like I connected a new battery to myself. It was amazing. Our country has a God-shaped hallmark that they're trying to fill with everything other than God. Now, we talked about the communist Marxist agenda. The first thing the communists and Marxists attack when they take over a country is Christianity. Not religion, Christianity. They attack it, they destroy it, because Christianity is the archenemy of communism and Marxism. In Australia, we have created a God-shaped void in our country, which is that vacuum is now being filled with all the isms. The communism, the fascism, the consumerism, all the other isms I talked about. That's our problem. If you want to fight communism and Marxism, which I believe is the real enemy, then secularism, then what you need to do is strengthen the faith of your nation so that there's no void. You know, when a tree is unhealthy, if a tree is not getting nutrients from the soil, that tree starves, and it puts out a message to all the pests in the area to come and attack it and destroy it. That's what happens. That's why if you make good compost tea and you fill the soil with nutrients, you create healthy plants, you don't need pesticide, because pests only attack unhealthy trees. Australia is a massive gum tree that's been made sick from the inside out, and it's being attacked by every pest that there is in the world today. My message to the people of Australia on this program, and it will be on Saturday, the long-term antidote to the ills of this country is to come back to God. We all need to get onto our knees and repent. And if we make ourselves a strong, fertile Christian country, not fanatical, not Christian national, but based on the principles of the gospel, Jesus Christ, faith, hope, love. If we honor God, like with the first tablet, the first 4 commandments are all about honoring God with everything we've got. Honor the Creator. Don't blaspheme. Don't worship other idols. And remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. That's a big one for me. And the last 6 commandments are about honoring each other. Now, if every man on the planet followed the Christian principles of living in the gospel, and we looked after the person on our right, we wouldn't need a government. We wouldn't need a police force. We wouldn't need a judiciary. We wouldn't need insurance companies. We wouldn't need banks. We would just be. And when we follow the 10 commandments of God, we're showing we're satisfied with everything that we have in this rich land that we have. Because anyone who breaks any of God's laws, they're dissatisfied. If you break the first 4 commandments about God, you're dissatisfied with your Creator. If you dishonor your mother and father, you're dissatisfied with your parents. If you commit adultery, you're dissatisfied with your partner. If you steal, you're dissatisfied with what you've been given. If you lie, you're dissatisfied with the truth. If you murder, you're dissatisfied with another human being. We spend our whole life locked in dissatisfaction. That's what's wrong with this country. If this country got on its knees and repented, and I've heard this said as a cliche so many times, but it's really hit me in the last 24 hours more than ever. We need to get on our knees. We need to forgive. We need to embrace Jesus Christ. We need to see him as our plan for salvation, because one day he's going to arrive and he's going to put a sword through all this rubbish, and there's going to be a lot of gnashing of teeth. And a lot of people are going to say to people like us, why didn't you tell us? I believe that with every core of my being. And you can call me every Bible basher under the sun, but unless this nation returns to God, we're lost.
Yeah.
Full stop. End of story.
Yep. Yeah, powerful message there, Graham. 100% concur, and we know historically that when a nation or a civilization ends up into immoral, so far immoral, they end up collapsing. It's been shown throughout history. So, a very powerful message. So, yeah, thank you very much for your generous time. I really do appreciate it. And when I watch your shows, when you're doing your interviews with others, one of the highlights is I usually bow my head as well when you're doing your prayers at the end. So I'm wondering if you do me the honor of doing a prayer to finish the show, and then I'll do an outro song, which I normally do. I've been listening to a bit of Christian blues from a YouTube channel called Holy Groove, and I usually play a bit of Christian blues at the end of it. But if you would do me the honor of being able to pray us out of this segment, that would be amazing. Thanks, Graham.
I'd love to, and I want to listen to the music as you play us out too, if you can do that.
No worries, it'll be there.
All right. Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we want the truth. but we want to be able to know the truth, and we need to be able to manage it. Lord, I once said to a friend of mine who was frustrated because all he wanted was the truth. I said to him, how are you going to know when you've got it? And what are you going to do with it when you get it? And Lord, that's what we need. Lord, I want to thank you for the coach of the Holy Spirit, which is guiding us every day to be better men and women than we were yesterday. I pray, Lord, that you will continue to bathe this nation in the light of your truth so that we can see the enemy clearly illuminated by the light of your glory, and that we will stand in that with compassion, not with fanaticism, but with strength of purpose, with love in our hearts, and with an outstretched hand. Lord, I pray for forgiveness. I pray for repentance. I pray for remedy, and I pray for reconciliation for this beautiful country. I thank you for people like Mark and the many other Christians who are out there. Father God, I just pray that you will guide and lead every step that we make. For I do this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank
Can
you,
I say
Graham.
one more thing?
You
I
can.
say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of Christians say to me, you shouldn't be involved in all this political stuff. They quote Romans 13, which says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and we're not meant to interfere with the government. But I want to quote this to those people who say that we've got to be passive. The time for passive faith is over. We need to be assertive, not aggressive, but we need to be assertive in our faith. Some of the examples I use, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they denied the mandates of the king on diet. Daniel denied the mandates of the king on worship. They stood against the government of the day as strong Christians, and God protected them. One of the most modern day examples we can use in that is William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce wanted to be a clergyman. But John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, who was a slave ship owner and captain who repented and came to God, begged him to stop the slave trade, to stop the transatlantic slave trade. And even though he wanted to go into ministry and be a clergyman, he agreed to John Newton's demands to stay in the Parliament. And for 17 years, he fought to abolish the slave trade. And he not only abolished the slave trade, but 2 days after he died, the abolition of slavery in the UK was passed as well. God wants men of courage to stand. There's a famous quote, and it goes like this: there is a want of the world, a want of men who will not be bought or sold, a want of men who are true to their conviction as the needle is to the pole, a want of men who will stand even though the heavens may fall, a want of Christian men. We are watchmen on the wall. We have a responsibility, and we need to act that responsibility out now. Thanks for letting me share that.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Time to stand up. Awesome. Well, God bless you, Graham. God bless the work that you and Michelle continue to do, and God bless Australia, this great nation under God. And I hope you have an amazing afternoon. And there's still lots to deal with. I know that you're a busy man, so we'll talk again soon. Good on you. I'll just play this song on the outro, and let's see. It's a good little YouTube channel. But anyway, I'll play that now.
It is a good thing to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises to thy name, O Most High adored, to show forth thy loving kindness every morn, and thy faithfulness each night till the new day is born. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree's height. They shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon's light, planted in the courts of the Lord above. They'll still bring forth fruit in unshaken love. How great are thy works and plans. Thy thoughts are deep beyond the minds of man. A brutish heart knows not thy way, but the wicked shall perish and fade away. But thou, Lord, art most high forevermore. Thy enemies fall, but the righteous will soar. Anointed with fresh oil, our strength shall rise. We'll sing of thy justice that never dies. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree's height. They shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon's light. Planted in the courts of the Lord above, they'll still bring forth fruit in unshaking love. To show the Lord is upright and just, He is my rock, in Him I trust.